Hello, everybody. Welcome to Language and Use Week 5, and I'll just go through the agenda. So, we're looking at dialogic teaching of language, which is the ongoing talk between teacher and students, introduction to the teaching learning cycle, an example of the cycle in action. So, we're looking at the teaching and learning cycle, focusing on Chapter 3 in our textbook, Teaching Language in Context. So, what are the principles underpinning the teaching and learning cycle? There's guidance through interaction in the context of shared experience. We recognise the importance of a shared context. We acknowledge the role of the teacher as the expert other, or we could even call them, I suppose, a facilitator. And we put in scaffolds or supports for the students to move into a more autonomous use of language. And a lot of you did that as you were working on your scaffolds for week 5. So I had a lot of insight into what you actually taught throughout your lessons as well. And also we're describing designed in scaffolding in action. So why do teachers talk? Obviously to get students' attention, to present information, to emphasise particular points. It could be something that they're teaching you for the first time, so they're trying to draw on certain aspects of it, to provoke discussion, to praise, to push for better answers, and to explain, and sometimes even to reprimand if the class is getting a little bit noisy. Okay, so what is the place of talking in pedagogy? So I'll just let you read that quote there by Alexander. Okay, so obviously teacher talk in the classroom is very important. I'll just give you a few minutes to have a look again. Okay, so one of the main tasks of the teacher is to create interactive opportunities and encounters which directly and appropriately engineer such mediation. And I suppose you as the individual teacher need to look for opportunities in the classroom where you can actually do that within your lesson. Okay, so we're looking at the initiation, response, evaluation, and feedback. And that's generally what you see played out in the classroom when a lesson is taking place. And I've got an example of a lesson there. And it's basically a teacher and different students talking. You know, teacher says, and what is this? An ant, yes, an ant, and this, a bee, and it goes on. So looking at different insects in the classroom, probably I'd say like a year 1 science lesson. Okay, and if we go to the next slide, we're looking at initiation, response, and feedback. Just drawing out the different parts so we can see what is at play in the classroom between the teacher and the student. If we go to the third slide, so still continuing this lesson, there's a lot more information there because the teacher is now actually sort of having a longer dialogue with the student. So when the student says, you know, it's an ant, tell me how you know it's an ant. Well, I've seen lots of ants. And then she goes on to say, yes, I bet you have, but I want to know how you know that one is an ant and not another insect like a spider. So again, the teacher is trying to draw out that information from that student, and it goes on for the other animals as well. So continuing talking about them and trying to get them to find evidence and more information to add to their knowledge base. So if we go on, Robin Alexander in 2005 saying that much of the interaction between teachers and students is neither conversation or dialogue. A lot of it, I suppose, is behaviour management and other things that are going on in the classroom. He also argues that children only have a brief moment to respond to a question because as the lesson is sort of developing, the pace is getting quicker. I think sometimes as a teacher, you don't have a lot of patience to wait for an answer. And I know that that's my issue. And I think that you need to stop and wait because you need to give students that opportunity. Closed questions, little opportunity to think aloud. Teachers talk too much and children don't talk enough. And sometimes from the student, it's the wrong kind of talk. It could be off topic, it could just be something that's really not adding to the lesson. So I suppose as a teacher, it's about you being able to oversee the kind of talk that's going on within your own classroom. So talk is the main tool for instruction and other activity. So we've got monologic versus dialogic. Okay, dialogic is more discussion or scaffolded dialogue. Monologic is the reciting of work, it's the rote learning, it's the instruction exposition. So they're at play within a typical classroom, I suppose you could say. When we talk about like discussion in the classroom, what are we talking about? So we've got a nice quote there, and then we've got some dot points. So it's not students talking to each other, because they might be talking about a totally different topic. It's not students chatting in an undirected or vague way. It's guided, it's directed by the teacher with a specific and clear focus. And that's why I think it's important for you to often write questions down before you go into the classroom, because if you have those questions ready, you'll be able to easily give them out to your students to guide that discussion. This is an interesting information here about how long do teachers in a classroom wait for an answer, 0.9 seconds. So again, it's going back to what I was saying to you before. You need to be patient and you need to try and give students time to think about their answer rather than putting them on the spot. You might give them, I don't know, some think time in order for them to give you a clearer answer. Okay, so some dialogic questions there. Sustaining the question, what else do we know about this topic? Extending, deepening thinking, deeper understanding. Does anyone have anything to add? Any evidence, other reasons? Challenge your thinking of your students. Do you agree or disagree and why? Okay, and it goes on. So there's some of the guiding questions you can ask in your classroom. Okay, so I'll just let you read the quote there by Wells about classroom language. So again, that gives you some food for thought about how you might change things in your own classroom, thinking about what you did while you were on prac and maybe how you could revise that. Okay, so this is the diagram that we'll keep coming back to as the rest of the slides go on. It's a gradual release of responsibility. So starting with building knowledge of the field, to supported reading, to modelling, to joint construction, and then independent use of the genre as the teacher kind of steps away, giving the student all the tools that it needs to keep writing in that particular text type or genre. Okay, so we'll start with building knowledge of the field, and we've talked about this a bit before. When a student comes into the classroom, you try to elicit their understanding of a certain topic, and then you start building on it from that, because it doesn't matter what topic you're presenting in the classroom, there will be a range of understanding within that classroom due to the variety of students in front of you and their background knowledge. So the supported reading, so you might give them extra information. They might go onto the internet to try and research whether it's a topic, just to give them more information. If it's a persuasive text, they might be looking for statistics or facts to add to what they know already. Or if it's just a general sort of narrative, they might add some other narratives in order to give them an idea of the structure and the different tools that a writer uses when they're actually composing a narrative. Okay, so modelling, it's sort of linked to that. You might model a narrative up on the board or a persuasive text. You might have a letter to the editor that you pull apart on the whiteboard to show the different sections of that letter. Keeping in mind that a lot of students aren't familiar with letters to the editor anymore. They don't read the newspapers. They might read articles online. So just make sure that you really model that clearly for them. Joint construction. So as a class, you might construct a text together, or you might construct one prior and just show them how you actually completed it. So moving away from narrative or persuasion, it could be like an information report. So you might give them an idea of how you structured it um, in order for them to kind of model their own response on. Independent usage of the genre. So it's basically you stepping away and saying, look, let's write another persuasive text, or give them maybe an old NAPLAN question that they can go back to and use and sort of deconstruct the question for them, and then see whether they can use the scaffold that you've already given them for an alternative question. Because I think that's where you can see whether all of your teaching has sort of produced a result that you like. Okay, and there we have the whole diagram again. All right, so I'll just give you a few minutes to look at the diagram, because we'll be coming back to this as we sort of unpack one of the tasks that we're doing in this week 5. Okay, so we're looking at growing beans, and obviously we're writing instructions for it. It's probably for, I don't know, a year 1 or year 2 class level. Some of you have created something similar in your own assignment, or even for the scaffold. So you're quite familiar with like the life cycle of a plant or a bean, and how I suppose you teach that to a class. Okay, so building knowledge of the field, again, start to think about what you could present to that class depending on their age level, what stage they're at, and obviously looking at the curriculum and what literacy level is like for those students will sort of guide you as to what kind of text that you can give them. But also, I suppose at this point is you're gauging what they already know about plants, maybe in particular beans. Have they grown any? That sort of thing. Okay, so the next one is just some of the things that you might do in order to build the field. You could brainstorm, go on an excursion, read, show images, show a YouTube clip, have someone in to speak about it, demonstrate. You might have done an experiment at home. You've done some pictures and you can show them how plants start to grow. You could watch part of a documentary. So there's lots of different activities that can kind of guide you. Okay, and there's some pictures there of different students getting into the actual task. So I suppose further on down the track, you'd bring in the soil, the plants, the seeds, and you start to put it all together. And I suppose have an experiment happening within the classroom. So just let you have a look at that and see how you'd sort of do it in your own classroom. Okay, so you've got just a very simple picture, the life cycle of a green bean plant. Okay, so there's like 4 separate stages there. So you might introduce the visuals as you're talking through the text, and that might be after you've already shown them a clip or 2 about plants and how they grow. So just get that visual in their mind. A lot of them are quite young, and their literacy wouldn't be that high level, so they'd need that. Okay, so a task could be whether you allowed them to cut up the pictures and put them in order, or you could just allow them to talk through it. You know, why are they in this particular order? Obviously, they're not in order there. And how do you know? Okay, so they might base their experience on what they've already seen in their own garden. They might be referring to a clip you've just shown them on YouTube. How do they know that they're in the right order? And then it says, pretend we have already been studying plants, so we know the names of the parts. Let's label the parts. Okay, so again, that's an exercise directed by you, and it could have been a previous lesson where you looked at, you know, a leaf, a stem, a root, all the different parts of the plant, and now it's time for them to put that knowledge to use and write all the labelling around that bean plant. Okay, and as you can see there, you could do it up on the interactive whiteboard if you want, or they could just do the task by themselves or in pairs. But they've managed to use all the different words that you've taught them in the previous lesson, and they've applied it to the life cycle of the green bean plant. So that looks quite good, and you could probably do another exercise from that, or that could be something that they all have in their books depending on how you decide to do it. So again, we're looking at the modelling of what you need to do for this particular task. And on the next slide, there's quite a lot of different activities. Again, suggestions. You could read relevant texts. You could do some detailed reading, students highlighting different parts of the text. You could discuss meanings and vocab. So again, the terminology around plants, thinking of science and what they need to know in the future years if you're looking at a primary school level. You could do some closed activities. So again, using the literacy, sequencing, chunking sentences, matching sentence and pictures, which is similar to what that other activity could have looked like if you had words with the images of the bean plant growing, cutting and rearranging text in order, labelling stages. So there's lots of different activities that you can do there. Just some questions there. I'll get you to read those to yourselves. And on the right-hand side, the instruction text is sort of coming together now. How do we actually grow the bean seeds? Okay, in the next slide, again, I'll let you read that to yourselves, but basically kind of drawing out what's the main goal, or I suppose in later years it would be called the aim of the experiment. What are the materials or equipment that we use? So again, the structure, the scaffold that they will definitely need when they get to the secondary setting. And the steps. What are the instructions? How do I now start to grow these bean seeds step by step? So if they're in a pair or a group and it's kind of like a mini experiment, they know exactly what they're doing. Okay, and the next slide is going, I suppose, into more detail, looking at the actual language of the text. And you're familiar with a lot of these words because you have been reading the textbook and you've also used them in your assignment. So the participants are nouns, quantities, count and non-count nouns. There's commands, there's action processes or verbs, get the 3 pots, put the soil in the pots, and obviously the circumstances. Okay, so I'll just let you have a closer look at that. Okay, and then obviously you can match the visuals with it. So put pot in the cupboard, put the soil in the pots, get the 3 pots. So all the different things that you need to do in order to grow the green bean seeds is there. Okay, so and then we go to the joint construction. So we're basically going around the teaching and learning cycle part by part, and we're matching it with the actual task that we've started, the science experiment. So again, the next slide is looking at what kind of activities you can use when you're jointly constructing the text. So some of the activities for joint construction: teacher leads the class in writing a new text in the same genre. So again, using the scaffold that you've already given the students in the same field. You don't want to go and build new context, so they can stay within that. Students might write in pairs to get themselves familiar with doing this task, or small groups, and then obviously getting feedback from the teacher, or they could have even peer assessment. So the last bit, the independent use of the genre. So that's the last step in the teaching and learning cycle. And again, the next slide gives you ideas of what kind of suitable activities there are for independent construction. So students could research a new topic in the same field for a text. They could plan and draft a new text. Teachers give feedback on the drafts, and the student might redraft and publish the text. And obviously they can reflect and provide feedback. So they can provide feedback to their friends or to other people in their kind of table setting. So we've also got some other examples for this field and genre. So, for example, does mold grow faster on dry, moist or wet bread? You could use that as a kind of stimulus. Or how corrosive are different soft drinks on coins? So again, experiments, they might replicate them at home and write up the results, or you might choose to do another one in class just to see and to model their responses on those different tasks. Okay, so I just want to move on to have a bit of a look at persuasive texts and also narratives. I know that we kind of introduced this last lesson, linking it to NAPLAN. So I'll just get you to read that. That's straight from your Teaching Language in Context book. Okay, and there's the structure, again from your textbook. So a statement of position, you're persuading, you're arguing. So you might give some background information about the actual field that you're looking at, an appeal from the person to kind of support, I suppose, your stance on that subject. Preview of arguments, so you might preview what your arguments will be in the first sort of paragraph, and then you start your arguments. So the arguments point elaboration, and then at the end you reiterate your appeal for support. Okay, so there's an example here from NAPLAN. So city or country, some people think the country is the best place to live, others think it is better to live in a city. What do you think? Where is the best place to live? Perhaps you think both places are good for different reasons. Okay, and again, there's a basic scaffold that they've included in the NAPLAN. Okay, the second part I've put in because we looked at this last lesson as well. Just some key points when you're planning your writing. Plan your writing, use paragraphs, write sentences. So choose your words carefully, looking at your vocab, look at your spelling, your punctuation, and then obviously edit your work before you submit it. So just a very general sort of checklist. You could include that to go with your scaffold. Okay, and there's another one there. What do you think about this idea? So reading books is better than watching TV. Write to convince a reader of your opinions. So again, that's an interesting topic. And I think the reason is because a lot of students do not read as much as they used to in the past. So that might be hard for them to argue. But again, you don't always get a task that's you agree with. So it's a matter of trying to think outside what your own beliefs are. Okay, so again, another task that you could use. Just a basic narrative structure, which I think you're all familiar with. Orientation, complication, and resolution. Now, sometimes a story begins with a complication or it's written like a flashback. And some narratives have a moral, a coda included as well. So again, you could provide examples of that. The one that I just took, but only took the sort of beginning from it, looking at narratives for older children, The Loaded Dog by Henry Lawson. And again, it's from your Teaching Language in Context. So just the orientation, looking at the introduction of the main characters and the setting. Okay, so you could maybe break down some narratives according to the level that your students are at. And then the next one there is just again a NAPLAN task. A narrative. So today you're going to write a narrative or a story. The idea for your story is the box. what is inside the box, how did it get there, is it valuable, perhaps it is alive. Okay, so just something to really get into their creativity. And again, just the basic things, what do you think about and what do you need to remember as you're planning your actual response there. Okay, so I hope you've got kind of like an overview of different text types and genres, and we'll talk more about that next lesson. And I hope you've uploaded your scaffold into the week 5 folder. Okay, enjoy your long weekend.